Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
For those of you on Zoom, I'm Stephanie Long. I'm the museum manager curator with the Wingfield Heritage House Museum. I was just giving some background that this is an ongoing project. We are still developing the museum. We're starting actually completely from scratch, new building, new collection, new research. So as I go through this, I may be telling you things that, well, gosh, I don't know the answer to why they did that, but it's on my research list of things to come. So if you haven't heard of the Wingfield Heritage House Museum, don't worry, you're not alone. We did just open in October of, why am I not moving forward? We did just open in October of, well, my map disappeared there. There's a star, that's where we're located. We're located at the intersection of Meacham Drive and Sudworth, if you're familiar with Ruidoso, kind of the two main drags in town, next to the Ace Hardware, if you've ever been to Ruidoso. The village bought the property in 2019 and rehabbed it, took it back to its original footprint. There's not a lot left of the original material inside since 1970s. It became a ski shop, and it's been a restaurant and a wine store and an ice cream shop. I did hope that the wine store had left something in the basement, but I haven't found anything yet. So the only thing really we have left on the interior that's original is the staircase and the fireplace. So we decided, instead of making it into a historic house, that we would make it into more of a gallery style museum. We had our grand opening on October 17th of last year. And this is the first round of exhibits that we have at the museum. Like I said, we're just starting to build our collection. So we're also doing kind of, I call this the first draft of the museum. As we get more stuff in, we'll add to the exhibits and make it a more robust experience as you come through. So in the upper left, you can see our Wingfield area. That's we talk about the family who built the house. That's the original fireplace there. Underneath, we have early Lincoln County. We're talking about the Native American periods, Paleo Indian up through the Archaic and the Mogollon, and then the Apache that are still here today. We talk about the fort and some of the early industries in Lincoln County. Up in the upper right is more of our Ruidoso period, when we start getting into the tourism economy that makes modern Ruidoso. And then, because most people have never heard, how many people here know Ruidoso history? Yeah, I didn't think a whole lot of people would. So most people coming through, even people from town, don't know a ton about Ruidoso. So we have this kind of overview timeline to get you going when you come in. Let's see. Our focus is Ruidoso, obviously, but we do talk about kind of the Sierra Blanca region and the Ruidoso River valleys down into the Hondo River Valley is kind of our area of focus. There is Fort Stanton and Lincoln not too far from us, so we kind of let them interpret that rather than trying to compete in our little space for the same material. Since you guys are the Juniata Historical Society and not the Lincoln County Historical Society, I thought I'd give you a little bit of background, a very high level background of what's going on in Lincoln County that leads into the Wingfield family arriving. So bear with me if you know all of this. Much like here, for a long period, that area was under the control of the Apache people. Really through the Spanish and Mexican periods of history in New Mexico, the Mescalero are really successful at keeping outsiders out of the area. The balance of power doesn't really shift until we have Fort Stanton, which is founded in 1855. And you start seeing people moving in mostly from the Manzano area of New Mexico. If you're familiar with if you stick a pin right in the middle of the center of the state, you have kind of sheep herding families and people who are doing subsistence farming moving down southeast into the Sierra Blanca area. And there's another group that kind of moves out towards Roswell. So they're the first people in. They're living in kind of these fortified compounds. During the Civil War, the fort's abandoned for a year. Things get a little messy again with the Apache, and then after the Civil War, the real push to deal with the the military campaign against the Apache starts, and you start to see a lot more people moving into the area. Um, the fort serves as the primary market for people who are moving into the area. If you're ranching or farming, you have this ready market of people who are looking for supplies and government contracts and such. Since it's a pretty isolated area, you're not going to be trying to haul beef up to Kansas or whatever. You have a market right there at the fort. Several of the veterans of at the fort come back to the area. They see opportunities. They move into the area because they can realize they can make some big bucks off of government contracts with beef and supplying feed and that sort of thing. You see that play out in the Lincoln County War, if you're familiar with that. In the Ruidoso area, the military veteran that comes back and sets up business is Paul Dallin, and he gets military contracts to supply lumber to the fort. So he builds a lumber mill that becomes known as Dallin's Mill. It's built in 1868, and he's supplying first, the mill first supplies the fort and then some of the reservations that pop up, and eventually the Mescalero Reservation as we know it today. He does quite well. He brings his brother out from Pennsylvania. William Dallin comes and joins him, and the two brothers do pretty well. Eventually, let's see, I've lost my place here. I believe it's 1877. They bring in another veteran named Frank Lesnett to take over management of the mill because they're running around having political careers and investing in all sorts of other businesses as well. And the day before Frank Lesnett arrives with his wife, Paul Dallin's actually murdered. So it's, it's a rough place to live. William Dallin continues his share of the mill in partnership with Frank Lesnett, but he makes some bad investments in some silver mines and ends up in some legal trouble. So he ends up selling off his share to Frank Lesnett, who then owns the whole shebang. And so Frank Lesnett ends up in control of the mill in 1882, and he establishes a post office at the mill, and that's when they choose the name Ruidoso for the area, was when that post office is. And the area is kind of known as the Ruidoso area anyway because of the river, but that's officially when Ruidoso begins. So that's setting the background for the Wingfields to arrive. We have post office in 1882, and we have the Wingfield family arriving in 1884. The first generation of Wingfields were Mary and Charles Wingfield. Charles is generally known as Charlie. He was born in Johnson County, Missouri, which is southeast of Kansas City, in 1850, and he works on the family farm for a while. And then according to family lore, he ends up going to Dodge City, Kansas for a couple of years and works in a livery stable there. And in the 1870s, this is a period of the big cattle drive. They're coming up to Kansas from Texas over the open range, trying to reach the railroads that are up, the railroad heads that are up there. So he hooks up with some of the cattlemen that are up there and ends up coming down into central Texas. We don't know exactly when he arrived in Texas. But about 1875, he marries Mary E. Lighton in the Hill Country area of Texas. Her family were longtime Texans. Her grandfather, Addison Lighton, was noted for fighting in the Texas Revolution and was at the Battle of San Jacinto. Her parents are less well known. Supposedly, her parents owned a store, and she was working in the store, and that's how she met Charlie Wingfield. Haven't found any evidence of where that store was yet, but I'm working on it. Charlie and Mary continue to live in the Hill Country area west of Austin for about 9 years. They have 4 children there. And then in 1884, they actually lose 2 of their children, like right in succession at the beginning of the year. Their oldest daughter, Della, who is 7 years old, and their 4-month-old son named Albert. And apparently this kind of spurs them to look for a fresh start. New research, I just found this about 2 weeks ago. Apparently 2 of Charlie's siblings were here in Lincoln County before Charles and Mary headed west. In a March 15th issue of the Las Vegas Gazette. Las Vegas is the most convenient railroad stop to Lincoln County in the early 1880s. Las Vegas newspaper says, Miss Sally Smith, sister-in-law of W.E. Anderson, the cattleman, arrived from Warrensburg, Missouri yesterday, accompanied by J.G. Greenlee and wife of Nob Noster and J.F. Wingfield and wife of Warrensburg. After spending a few days in Las Vegas, the party will proceed to White Mountains to pass the summer on a ranch which Mr. Anderson had recently purchased. This caught my eye because J.G. Greenlee is actually Jesse Greenlee, who's married to Charlie's younger sister, Nancy Wingfield. And J.F. Wingfield is John Frank Wingfield, who is his younger brother. So apparently they had sent news back to their older brother that things look pretty good here in Lincoln. Why don't you head this direction? At least that's my supposition. So that Charlie and Mary pack up their 2 kids and head for Lincoln County, and they bring David and Eliza Lighton, Mary's parents, along with them. At first, they find lodging at Fort Stanton while they scope the area out. Charlie finds work carting supplies for the government land surveyors who are working in the area, and he picks up land surveying from them. And he soon meets Frank Lesnett, who's looking for a manager at the mill. So he hires Charlie and Mary to move to the mill and take over operations there. And I should say the mill includes 400 acres around the mill where there's farming and ranching and various other things going on as well. Charlie and Mary move to the mill, take over the store, the post office, and the blacksmith shop that's there as well. They run a small dairy, and they start up a hog farm. So they have a lot of different enterprises going on here in the Ruidoso area. They eventually end up with 10 children, 7 of whom live into adulthood. And this picture in the circle up here in the upper right is the only picture I found of them actually living at the mill. So it's a very early picture. In 1890, Charles starts a homestead claim up the valley, a homestead claim on 160 acres upstream from the mill to the west of the mill. And he also purchases 160 more acres from Benjamin Stewart. Mr. Stewart remains in the area and is even boarding with at the Wingfield house later in life. So I don't know what his story is, why he sold off and how he ended up with the land to begin with, but he remains a friend of the family for quite a while. Charlie builds an adobe home near the present day Wingfield house, and the Wingfield starts to become very well known in the region. Charlie becomes the Lincoln County tax assessor. 1891, he becomes the Ruidoso postmaster. 1894, he's elected as the county coroner. In 1895, he's appointed as game warden. He did run for sheriff in 1900, but he lost the race, although he did win as county commissioner in 1908, which he held until his death in 1910. And during his campaign for county commissioner, the Carrizozo paper has this to say about him. Charles W. Wingfield was the unanimous choice of the Democratic Convention for the Commissioner of the 3rd District. Mr. Wingfield lives on the Ruidoso, where he's noted for his hospitality and large-heartedness. He is educated, a man of well-developed business instincts, and thoroughly familiar with county affairs, a heavy taxpayer, and is exceptionally qualified for a commissioner. Sounds like a lot of good spin there. He's popular with all the parties who are acquainted with his many good traits, both of head and heart, and should be elected by a very large majority. So apparently at least the editors in the newspaper liked him. He's often described in the local social notes as jolly and genial, and pointed out as one of our best citizens. Charlie passes away in 1910, but Mary lives another 18 years, living with their son Ike later in life. While her husband lived a very public life, we know less about her. We know that she was instrumental in keeping all the businesses and properties going. She's the one that started the dairy operation on the Wingfield properties, which is a tradition that's carried on in later generations. And unlike Charles, who dies in 1910, Mary and her mother, Eliza, both live long enough to show up in many of the family snapshots that we have from the 20s and 30s, often as the matriarchs in the background, very sternly looking over things. So here's an example of one of those photos. We actually have 4 generations here. Mary's on the left, and Eliza, her mother, is on the right. Doris is Mary's daughter, and then the little baby is Ike Wingfield's daughter Della. So you have great grandmother down to the baby there. Speaking of Ike Wingfield, second generation for the Wingfield family is related to the Wingfield house is Ike and Lula Wingfield, who built and lived in the house. And it's under their watch that Ruidoso really starts to develop into the town that we know today. From the 1890s to about 1915, the Wingfield homestead is the only home, the only structures in the Ruidoso Valley west of the old mill. But in the 1910s, something happens which starts to change life in the valley, and that's that people in western Texas and New Mexico start getting automobiles. And with an automobile comes the freedom to go find cooler weather in the summer, and they head up to the mountains and escape the heat of the desert. Cloudcroft has already been serving this purpose with the rail line that runs up there for about the generation before. And when the automobiles come, you start seeing all kinds of notices in the papers about, hey, Ruidoso is pretty great. Why don't you take a run up to Ruidoso with a map and instructions on which tree to turn by and cross the brook here, look for the fence, and you can go up there and that sort of thing. So this period, there's a lot of new highways being built all throughout New Mexico, and Ruidoso becomes a popular destination, particularly for Roswell and El Paso. What used to be a several-day wagon ride is now just a few adventurous hours away. Camping is a popular pastime for a lot of motorists. In fact, if you look at the old Sears and Roebuck's catalogs from the period, you'll find camping attachments that you can hang off your Model T, and it's part and parcel to being a motorist out on a great adventure. You start to get in, if camping's not your thing, we start to get inns built in the area in 1914. The first vacation cabin shows up in 1915. So Ruidoso is on the verge of really taking off. The Wingfields, Ike and Lula Wingfield, start to take advantage of this. Ike was born in the old mill in 1887. He married a local girl named Lula Robinson in 1911. They had 3 children, Della, who is known as Tootsie, and you find her labeled in all the pictures as Toots or Tootsie. Her younger sister, Opal, and then there was a younger son named Ike Jr. Both girls lived into adulthood, but Ike Jr. Died at 13 at a drowning accident at Elephant Butte when they were on vacation. And they're very industrious people. They kind of invented the term hustle, if you want to think of that as they're just whatever is going on, they're going to find a way to get involved in it. Ike opens a general store in 1921. He moves the post office up there. The picture on the top is from 1925. It shows the general store and the post office. And then the one on the bottom is from 1931. You can see the Wingfield house across the street from the stores, which have a new facade on them. Over time, these buildings come to include a general store, a barber shop, a soda stand, a newsstand, a post office, a gas station, and a cafe. So anything you could possibly want if you're passing through. Apparently, it was also a good place to find out where the good fishing holes were. And there's stories of the girls running out. There's a gate that you have to go through to get to the upper canyon. So the girls were making pennies and nickels as tips as they went out and opened the gates for folks coming through. The Wingfields also take on a dairy, a hog farm. They run cattle. They build a dancing and meeting hall, a skating rink. They're still farming quite a bit. Lula has a big garden, and they also rent out rooms to boarders in the area as well. Generally, Ike is off running the general store, and Lula's running everything else. As the town develops, Ike's also involved in building the first phone lines into town. They install the first power station. Ike becomes a volunteer firefighter, postmaster, forest fire warden, a justice of the peace, a member of the school board, member of the village council, and he even becomes mayor for a few years. So quite involved in the community. Ike, and then later his daughter Della also get involved in real estate. At first, they're leasing out parts of their property for people to have vacation cabins, and then they start actually subdividing and selling off the lots for real. Over time, the locals start to call Lula and Ike Mommy Lula and Daddy Ike because they were involved in everything. As part of this founding collection that we also got a fair amount of stuff from the Robinson family, which was Lula's family. Lula grew up in Benito, New Mexico. If you're not familiar with Benito, it's because it doesn't exist anymore. It's now called Benito Lake. It's right here. And this is Ruidoso right here. And Benito is a mining area. You can see their lovely home up here at the top of the screen. The Benjamin Ransom Robin and Sonora Ann Moore grew up in East Texas, and they move into Lincoln County in the late 1880s, working several mining claims. Again, they're kind of jacks of all trade. If you look up Benjamin B.R. Robinson in the census, every census he's listed as something else, a miner, a farmer, a rancher, that kind of thing. Benito is a big mining district with Nogales, which is up here. However, I don't know if you know the story of Benito and the pipeline. The El Paso and Southwestern rail line runs right along here, go through there, the ones that actually founded Carrizozo and Alamogordo. And Carrizozo becomes a spot where the locomotives need to be refilled. And the water in Carrizozo is pretty awful. It's very hard. So they're putting water into the locomotives and it's kind of foaming, which you can imagine isn't great for inside of a train engine. So when the El Paso and Southwestern buys out the rail line, they decide to build a pipeline of water from the mountains. And Benito is located right at the kind of the headwaters of the Rio Benito, which runs downstream to the fort and then into Lincoln. So they buy out all the settlers in the area, they buy out their property and their water rights so that they can build a little reservoir up there. 1911, when Ike and Lula get married, they're still living in Benito, but I think they move out of Benito pretty soon up to Parsons, which is just kind of up the canyon from where they were. The Parsons mine is actually one of the more successful mines in the area. When they move to Parsons, they have a much larger house up here. They're doing pretty well. Benjamin and Sonora Ann end up with 11 children. So they outdo the Wingfields by one child, but they do lose 3 children in infancy and 1 as a teenager. We do have a lot of records from Benjamin Ransom Robinson showing his brand registration for the livestock that he's running. We have stock certificates from the different mines that he's investing in. I think there's a little bit of like, oh, I found this great mine, I'm gonna go sell it to these suckers back east going on. And I think several people in the area are doing that too. So just judging from some of the correspondence that we have. Let's see. Interestingly, between the 2 families, the Wingfield and the Robinsons in this generation, and Ike and Lula's generation, there's actually 4 different marriages between these 2 families. Ike and Lula are actually the 3rd of these siblings to get married. So you have, in all of these pictures, the Robinson is on the left and the Wingfield is on the right. So you have two of the Robinson sisters married 2 of the Wingfield brothers, and 2 of the Wingfield sisters married the Robinsons brothers. So you have all these quadruple cousins running around, and it's great fun to try to figure it out on the family tree. So anyway, it's kind of a fun fact about these 2 families. Everybody says, oh, well, there weren't that many people up there, so they had to marry each other, but they weren't. There were more people than that. I mean, it wasn't quite that sparse. I think they just really enjoyed each other's company. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it. The Morrison family, this is Della, who is Ike and Lula's daughter, marries a man named Walter Morrison. And her sister Opal ends up getting married and moving to California. So the Morrisons are the main Wingfield descendants that remain in Ruidoso. I haven't had a chance to do a whole lot of research on Walter's family yet. I was focusing more on the Wingfields and the Robinsons. But Della and her daughter, Evelyn, are the two people in the family that really start to collect all the family history. So she does collect quite a bit from the Morrison family. And then Walter Morrison's mother is a Brownfield, so we have some from the Brownfield family as well. But I haven't quite wrapped my head around all of these people yet. Um, but Walter was in Ruidoso, building stone retaining walls and things like chimneys and foundations for the new cabins that are being built when he meets Della. And they get married in 1931, and he builds the chimney and fireplace that are on the house as a wedding, as a help for his new in-laws. They have two children, Evelyn, born in 1933, and William, who's known as Bucky, in 1935. Walter dies in 1937, so they're only married for about 6 years, leaving Della to raise their children with the help of her parents. And in terms of importance for the museum, it's Evelyn and Della that really do collect a lot of this material. Evelyn was a Sun Bowl princess. I think she's quite pretty. She was the Ruidoso representative to the Sun Bowl. If you go back and look at the Morrison family, this is a part I haven't really researched, but there's some really amazing photos in this part of the collection, so I thought I would just share it with you. The Morrisons start off in Arkansas. Walter's grandfather is born in Arkansas, and they kind of slowly make their way across central Texas and eventually make their way to El Paso. Mary Brownfield, who's Walter's mother, they're also kind of moving around Texas, and these families, like every time they show up, they're living somewhere else. So every child's born in a different town, every person's married in a different place. So I haven't quite wrapped my head around about who's living where. They do meet up in El Paso where Mary Brownfield and William Jackson Morrison get married. And then again, Mary's sister marries William's brother. So you have the double family wedding thing happening there too. So part of the reason why it's hard to figure out who all these people are. The Morrisons end up moving to Lower Penasco, which is east of Cloudcroft, kind of a little bit east of Mayhill, if you know that area. And then the Brownfields end up settling in Orange, New Mexico. And I had a hard time finding Orange because it doesn't exist anymore. But I did find it on this 1914 map, and it's all the way down here at the bottom, right at the state line with Texas. And it's right near, well, really nothing at all. There's really no local landmarks for me to even tell you where it is. So even in Texas, there's not much on the other side of the border. Now there really isn't a town there anymore. There's a couple of wildlife refuges down there. But that's where the brownfields end up. And I believe these areas were at one point part of Juniata County when it was much larger than it is today. So, oh, I should say Walter was a twin, so he had a twin brother. Look, that's the little cuties there in the middle. Family lore has it that William Jackson Morrison and his father, David Crockett Morrison, were working in quarrying stone, and they were the ones, they helped haul a lot of the stone that went into St. Joseph's Church, which is the large church you find in Mescalero now. They didn't build the church, but they supplied a lot of the stone, which fits in with Walter working with the retaining walls and whatnot in Ruidoso. The Morrison family ran the CA Ranch in Lower Penasco, and I think these photos are like just so evocative of the time period. I don't know much about the ranch. They didn't seem to have it for very long because from what I can tell is after about a decade, they end up also moving down to Orange to join the Brownfields as well. And then the Brownfield family, they have, this is my favorite picture in the entire collection of the lovely Brownfield ladies out at White Sands in their REO wagon. I'm not sure if it's a speed wagon or not, but it's one of my favorite photos. So this is future research to figure out how all these people are and how they relate back to our Wingfields in Ruidoso. And that is all I have on the families. I can't tell you that we are building, back to the museum, we're building a collection from scratch for this museum. So if you guys know anyone with anything relating to Ruidoso or Sierra Blanca or the Ruidoso River Valley, please let me know. We are collecting whatever we can. We started off with the Wingfield collection, which I've made it through about 1,500 items of that collection. There's still quite a bit to go, but we're trying to build the collection up as well. We do have a little shop in the gift shop in the museum. I do a weekly radio program called Ruidoso Rewind. Tomorrow will be our 50th episode, so I'm kind of excited about that. It's about a 5 to 10 minute spot. If you're interested, you can find the old episodes on the radio website, which is 1490 krui.com, or you can just Google Ruidoso Rewind. And we are working on creating a new friends group for the museum as our nonprofit arm. We just got our 501c3 status, so we're trying to get that off the ground as well. So I did not bring any business cards, but if you'd like to contact me, you can take a picture of this slide and you'll have my contact information. The museum's open Wednesday through Saturday from 10 to 5. We do have a small admission charge. Adult are $5, seniors 65 and up are $3, and then we let children in for free as well. So, and that's all that I had for you today. Like I said, we're a work in progress. We'd love to have you stop by and check us out. So. Did anyone have any questions? Ruidoso. If you come up Sudworth, which is the main drive off of 70, right before you get to Meacham, which you turn and go up to Alto, it's right before you get to that intersection on the left side. So if you see the Schlotskys, it's across the street from the Schlotskys. Yep. The property been sitting vacant for a while, and there was the thought that this is one of the most historic structures in town, being the old homestead, and that it should be saved. And there was also the thought that Ruidoso's never really had a historical society. That's why we're starting this all from scratch. So there was some interest in getting a historical society started so that we can build a collection, and 20 years from now, we may be in a larger history center or something like that, but this at least gets us started. The old mill had been kind of a historic structure. It's never really been a museum, but they talked a lot about what was going on in the past. They had that gas line explosion about a decade ago, and they're still trying to restore it. It is privately owned, so it just seemed like this was the place to start if we were going to try to build a historic presence in Ruidoso. Do you have anything about the racetrack? We have some stuff about the racetrack. It's certainly an interest of ours. We will be collecting in that. I have mostly postcards and some like ticket stubs and that kind of stuff from the racetrack right now. Don't have any like real saddles or anything like that. They do have their own little Hall of Fame museum down there as well. The mayor's heavily involved with the racetrack, so I'm sure we'll be getting some stuff in over time. So. The building is wheelchair accessible. We only use the downstairs area for the museum. We have storage and offices upstairs, so we are wheelchair accessible. No, but I was scared. No, I had just finished the Wingfield display like that Friday, and the fire broke out on Monday. I was like, oh, typical, it's gonna burn down after I finish it. But no, if you haven't been up to Ruidoso since the fire, most of what burned was actually a residential area. So if you're driving through town, you're probably not gonna see a lot of impact until you look up on the ridge lines and stuff and see the burned areas up there. The flooding did take out some areas, along the river and along that area, but, no, I was watching the fire map very closely though, as it was burning, so and I did evacuate to Roswell, so, if you'd like to hear about the fire experience, yeah, everyone in town could probably tell you a little bit about that, so. We are funded right now, we are funded through the village. They got a couple of grants to help do the renovation, but where our general funds come through the general fund of our general operating costs come through the general fund of the village. We're hoping to, raise money through memberships and missions, events, and that kind of stuff, and then our nonprofit as well, but we are part of the municipal government. I say we, I'm part of the municipal government, so. All right, well, thank you guys for listening to me, and please stop by if you're in the area.